And God took some of the water and put it above the earth. And the rest of the water he left on the earth. The water that he put above the earth was a cloud canopy that covered the whole thing. All of it. And that cloud canopy was miles thick of cloud. That cloud kept the radiant light of the sun, the ultraviolet rays of the sun from coming through. So people lived a lot longer then. There was no rain on the earth. It was watered with a mist that came from the ground. And so we're going to see the next chapter is going to tell us what changes all of this. And after that chapter, you're going to see a big change in the age of all of these people. You'll see the age go down. Now, yes.
Why did Enoch not die? Why was he taken up?
Why was he not taken up? I mean, why was he taken up?
Did he walk with God?
Because he walked with God.
But did the rest of them not walk with God?
Evidently not like him.
Not like him.
Not like this fellow.
Yeah.
This fellow only lived 352 years when everybody else was living 960.
65.
And God just took him, it says. It says, wouldn't that be a blessing? Can you imagine living such a life that God would just want you to take you to be with him? Wouldn't that be wonderful? But that's exactly what he did with him. He just took him. Now,
Hebrews 11 says he walked by faith, therefore he was pleasing to God.
you got it.
What was it?
Absolutely. I got it. Oh, you got that. Okay. Anyhow,
Yes.
when the next chapter is going to tell us what changes all of this. Now let's go and look at chapter 6. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be, they're going to go down to 120 years.
What verse is that?
The Nephilim, where are you? Okay. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. When the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. Who are the Nephilim?
Giants.
A lot of people say that they're the giant offspring of the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. They don't read this right. Let's read it. It says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, before, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughter. So the sons of God came to the daughters of men. The Nephilim were already on the earth. They're not the offspring of them. What are they? The word in the Hebrew just means giant ones that have fallen. It literally refers to not giant people, it's giant things or animals. Giant animals that fall upon people. They're huge, giant. What giant animals would those be? Absolutely. I'm convinced that that's the term for dinosaurs. We could just put dinosaurs there. The dinosaurs were on the earth before the sons of God. Who are the sons of God?
My opinion is Jude makes it sound like they're angels.
Huh?
I was told they were angels at one point.
If you read the book of Job, turn to the book of Job.
Job or Jude? Job.
Look at Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1 verse 6. Somebody read verse 6.
One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them.
Does your angels have a letter beside it or something?
Yeah, it's an A.
What is it?
It says the Hebrew word for the sons of God.
There you go. What were the sons of God in Job?
Angels.
Huh?
Angels.
Angels.
doesn't have-
Why would not the sons of God in Genesis be the same as they are in Job? Huh? You got any ideas? Now there are those who say that the sons of God are the descendants of Seth, and the daughters of men are the descendants of Cain, and that Cain's descendants were all wicked, and Seth's descendants were all good, and so he called them sons of God. And the daughters of men were the daughters of Cain. But why would humans marrying humans make giant men, or make these great giant men of old, which it says when they came and had daughters by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. How could those humans marrying humans make renowned hero men? I don't think they could. I think it's really the sons of God are angels. And when you turn to the book of Jude, if you'll turn to the book of Jude in the New Testament, back before the book of Revelation, we'll just read about them.
This is why we study. This helps.
Okay. You ready? Verse 5. Though you already know all this. Now he's telling them something they know, isn't he? These people to whom Jude is writing know what he's talking about. He says, though you already know all this, I want to remind you that the Lord delivered his people out of Egypt, but later destroyed those who didn't believe. And the angels who didn't keep their position of authority, but abandoned their own home, these he's kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. What angels left their home and came to earth? No, this is long before Satan. This is long before Satan brought the angels down. This is back when Satan was there in heaven with God, and he was talking to God about Job. And God says, where are you? He was in the presence of God then. Here, this has to be something else. Let's read it. Let's go on. These he's kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way to what the angels did, in a similar way to what the angels did. The men of Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. Somehow those angels that left their position of authority had been involved in sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. I'm convinced that the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6 is talking about angels.
Me too.
And the angels came and the angels saw the daughters of men that they were beautiful. They came and took any one of them they wanted and had offspring by them, and their offspring were mighty men of old, men of renown. Like who? Who do you think of? From Homer's, from the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Hercules.
Yes. Who else? Who's the guy that got shot with an arrow in the back of his heel?
Achilles.
Achilles. All of those stories are of sons of God marrying daughters of men and making men of renown, like Homer wrote about. I don't think Homer's so much fairy tale as much as it is actual history. Wow. That opens up things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
In Numbers 13:33, it says, we saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, from the Nephilim. They seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked to the same to them. They were talking about the giants that were trying to take the land, and the half of the ones that explored out said that the people were too strong and too large. So it says that the Nephilim were there in that land.
Yeah, they chose that word to put in there.
So, but it might not be the same
And it's
thing.
much later. Well, it just means then giants.
Okay.
But back in Genesis chapter 5 and chapter 6, when you read it the very first time, they're giant ones, not humans. They're giant, and the word that's used is a neuter word. It's not a masculine or feminine word. It's neuter. giant ones, which are creatures. Okay, now, listen to this. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of his thoughts of his heart was evil all the time. And the Lord was grieved that he made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I'll wipe mankind whom I've created from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, birds of the air, for I'm grieved that I've made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. And he walked with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. How old was he when he had those 3 sons? 500 years old. He was 500 years old when he had those 3 sons. And then God said, I'm going to bring a giant flood upon the earth. How old was Noah when the flood was over? In the 600th year of Noah's life, chapter 7, verse 11, on the 17th day of the 2nd month. When he went in the ark, it was the 600th year, first day. His sons were 100 years old, and they had wives. And he took his sons and their wives, 8 of them got on the ark. God shut the door. God brought 2 of every kind of animal to them in the ark. God shut the door of the ark, and then it started, the cloud canopy started to empty. How long did it take for it to empty? 40. Can you imagine having rain 40 days and 40 nights? We don't have enough clouds to do that anymore. It can't happen. But then there was. The cloud canopy took 40 days and 40 nights to empty on the earth. And then what happened? The fountains of the deep opened up. That's Edwards Aquifer and every other aquifer on the face of this earth. You know how much water there is underneath the earth? As much as there is on it. And all of that water burst forth and came upon the earth. And every mountain was covered to 15 feet above the highest mountain. You know how the highest mountain is? How high is it?
Way up there.
Huh?
Way up there.
12 miles is the highest mountain on the earth. Can you imagine that? That's how much water was on the earth. All over the earth. And the only thing that survived was the ark with 8 people and all of the animals in it. That's it. Then all of the people that were on the earth, all of the animals that were on the earth, when the fountains of the deep opened up and the waters all came up on top of the earth, it took 150 days for the flood to cover the earth. The rain lasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and the rain and the water coming up from under the earth lasted for 150 days. It was 150 days of water coming on the earth. That's a lot of water. Do you know what filled those cavities down in the earth when all of that water came up?
The bodies.
Huh?
The bodies.
The bodies of animals and men.
Plants.
What do we have that proves that now?
Fossils.
What do we have?
Oil.
Fossil fuel. What is fossil fuel?
Oil.
Animal fuel. It's oil made from animals that fill those holes under. Now we have these huge pools of oil under the earth. Huge lakes of oil under the earth that were all animals and men at one time. That's why it's called fossil fuel, because it's made from living things. And also, we have all of these other beds all over the earth that are filled with trees. What did they become?
Coal.
Coal. Coal comes from trees, plants. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
That's
And
why
so
it's
coal is
limited.
plants, oil is animals. How'd they all get down there? How did all the, you ask your science teacher, he can't tell you how all those animals got down there. Can't tell you. But the Bible tells us that the fountains of the deep opened up and all the water came up on it. When it came up, it sucked all them down. And the population of the earth before the flood was more than it is now. There were more people. Yes.
So this fossil fuel you're talking about, that's what we use for driving our cars and all this?
Yes.
So we could be burning your great granny.
We're driving on humans. Okay. Now, what God is showing us here is the seed line of Seth down to Noah. And then all of a sudden we have this interlude with Noah and the flood. Very important. It's history. It's not a fairy tale. It's history. It actually happened. And all of that is very important. But then the seed line follows the flood in Genesis chapter 7 through 9. Let's look at that. We're not going to read it because we're just going to see verse 11. In the 600th year of the second month, on the day that the springs of the great deep burst forth and the floodgates of heaven were opened and rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And then it says on down the 40 days and for 17. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth and the waters increased. They lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased on the earth, and the oak floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains under the entire heaven were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Wow! And then, verse 8, chapter 8, it says, God remembered Noah. In chapter 9, it talks about God's covenant with Noah. What is the covenant?
Promise.
Huh? A rainbow. First time there's a rainbow. What does the rainbow say? It's God's covenant with the earth. I'll never destroy the earth again with water. That's exactly what it means.
He says, I will never curse the ground because of man. That's the promise.
Yeah?
Not with water. It just, I won't do it again because of man.
He says,
Verse 21. Verse 21. And never curse the ground because of man.
Where are you reading that one from?
8:21.
Of what?
Genesis 8:21. I will never curse the ground because of man. Because their heart is always evil. If he were to do it because of man, he would be killing us over and over and over again. But he was never going to do that
Never
again
again.
because of man.
okay,
I was saying it was actually
the ark came to rest on the Mount Ararat on the 601st year of Noah's life. He was in the ark for a year and 2 weeks. Isn't that something? Long time. It wasn't 40 days and 40 nights that they were in the ark. They were in the ark for a year and 2 weeks before they could come out on the earth, before the water had gone down enough where the ark was resting up on the top of Mount Ararat, before enough of the water had gone down for them to even come out of the ark. And the water is still going down. Did you know that? What do you think caused the glaciers at both poles? It's clear water. It's not salt water. It's clear water.
Frozen water.
And there's no snow at the South Pole, and there's no snow at the North Pole. There's no rain. There's no measurable participation. Did you know that? It hasn't measured that since there's been history of man, there's been no measurable precipitation at either one of the poles. Where'd all that water come from? And at the North Pole, 1,000 foot up in one of those glaciers is a huge whale, frozen, up there. How did it get up there? Unless it was already in there when it froze. Right? Because it's still frozen. As are all those mammoth elephants that are melting in Siberia. You know, as that ice cap melts, we find animals in them. They found a mammoth elephant in one there, and the dogs of the sled that they took up there, those sled dogs were barking at this ice cliff, and they went up to see what the dogs were barking at, and there was a mammoth elephant inside the cliff, and they chipped the thing out, took it out, fed the meat to their animals, took meat back to London, and had a big dinner for all the people that came to search that, and fed them mammoth elephant steaks. How could that 5,000-year-old mammoth still be fresh to eat. It had unspoiled buttercups in its teeth and unspoiled food in its stomach still. It was frozen when it froze, and it never melted. Isn't that something? Wow, we gotta quit.